Okay, so why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? So your name, your year, and what submitted in this year.
Hi, I'm Lauren Furman. I'm a graduating senior with the class of 2020, and I submitted a piece called Wilt the Flowers, Devour the Bones.
Cool. And this was a creative piece, right?
Yes.
Okay, so to get started, could you tell me a little bit about your writing process, and in particular, how do you draft and revise a piece, and how do you know when a piece is finished?
Absolutely. So this piece is actually a little different than any piece I'd ever written before. It was written for a historical writing class, and the whole point of the class was that we wrote one story over the course of the entire semester. So this story went through 9 different drafts,
Wow.
and it was written over the course of about 12 weeks. So for this one, we had to do background research, clearly because it's historical fiction. So I read 2 novels, The Lost City of the Monkey God and The Lost City of Z, to do research kind of on South America and colonialism in South America, and then kind of took it from there and went through a lot of different versions of the same story.
Cool. And how did you select the topic for this piece? And maybe generally, how do you select topics for pieces that you write?
For this piece in particular, I selected the topic because it's an era in history that I'm really interested in. And I thought it was just something that I had been reading a lot about and would be really cool for this class. And in general, I sort of pick topics the same way. I read a lot and I write a lot, and generally those 2 bounce off of each other. So anytime an idea strikes me, I tend to go with that.
Cool. And was this your first creative writing piece, or creative writing that you'd written for class, or had you had experience with this before?
I've taken creative writing classes before. Yeah.
Okay.
This was the only one for this class.
Cool. And then this is maybe a little bit different for a creative piece than it would be for a research paper. But one thing that writers often struggle with is an introduction or a conclusion. So how do you feel about those for research papers, and how is that maybe the same or different for what you wrote for this piece?
So when I write research papers, I actually usually do the introduction last, because at that point, it's kind of similar to a conclusion. You want to know everything that you're going to say. Whereas when I do creative pieces, the introduction is always comes first for me. It's the hook, it's getting started, it's drawing the reader in, and kind of I'm figuring out where I'm going with it at the same time.
Cool. And then how do you do a conclusion for your creative piece? So how do you know a creative piece, how did you feel like it's done? Because I feel like a creative piece could go on in theory for as long as you wanted it to, right? So how do you end it?
Yeah, I guess it could go on here to be better. That's something that I feel out with each piece. I don't really plan my stories out in advance. I just feel them out as I write them. So this one had a really neat, clean ending, and that took 9 drafts to get there. Yeah.
Would you say that that's more drafts or fewer drafts than you usually work with for a piece?
Way more.
When you're writing, do you feel that you do more drafts for creative or argumentative pieces, or about the same?
Definitely argumentative. For those, I usually outline and draft them and revise them, whereas creative, I'm usually a one and done. I write it and it's over.
Cool. So I have one question about this specific piece that you wrote. So could you just give a general summary of the what you submitted to the symposium, and then I'll ask my question.
Yeah. So Wilt the Flowers, Devour the Bones is told from the perspective of the entire jungle in central Honduras, as it tracks 3 colonial men following 3 colonists as they search for hidden treasure in a city, and it ends with the colonists ultimately killing the native men.
And it was a really, really interesting piece when I read it. And one of the things that I was most struck by is the fact that it is told from the perspective of the jungle. And how did you decide? That's a very unique perspective to take, right? So how did you decide that you were going to write from the perspective of the jungle and not from the native peoples or the colonizers?
Great question. So the first 4 drafts actually took place from the perspective of the native men, and it was really good. I got great reviews, and it was kind of the same storyline, but it wasn't quite capturing, I guess, the overarching and cyclical nature of the things that were going on that I wanted. So I kind of brainstormed what I could do to zoom out and capture those things. And one idea that I was playing around with was giving it a new narrator, and that was the only thing I could think of that was big enough but still close enough to tell those stories with some hint of personal connection. So I just went for it, and it ends up being really cool, I think.
Cool. Um, and is it different? Have you written other creative pieces like with non-human, from the non-human perspective before, or is this your first go at that?
This was the first one that was that ambitious. The rest has been all human narrators.
Um, cool. And what was maybe your favorite part, or the most memorable part of this process of writing this piece?
I really enjoyed learning actually about the flora and fauna. That's one of the things that was really fun. I love traveling and learning about those things, and I'm really interested in kind of nature. So assuming the identity of that narrator jungle was kind of one of the hardest, but also one of the most fun parts, kind of doing all that background research.
That's awesome. So that's it for the formal questions that I have. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about the piece or about your writing process generally?
No, I don't think I have anything else to share.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're gonna hopefully get this up online soon.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.